Welcome to Talking Heads on USA Global TV, starring the one and only wonderful Dr. Jacqueline. It's a prestigious place where world-class influencers and experts meet, and where you'll find the most trusted advisors and coaches for all things in life and business. Visit usaglobaltv.com to sign up for our newsletter, get the value you need, and be first in line to learn about events and giveaways and other valuable content. Connect with us. Email Dr. Jacqueline at usaglobaltv.com to talk about how you can become part of USA Global TV. That's USA Global TV, where the doctor is always in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to USA Global TV, and hello to our friends listening on Business Talk Radio out of New York. I'm Dr. Jacqueline KERBECK, and our show today is Authentic Achievements. I am so honored and thrilled to do this show with a wonderful, talented, very successful woman. Her name is KIM-ADELE Randall, and she is a leadership and business expert. She's a best-selling author, and she is here to join us today and share more about her story as we welcome our guests. Hello, Kim. How are you?
I'm really good, Dr. Jacqueline. How are you?
I'm super. And by the way, thanks for creating this lovely background. I just adore it.
Oh, a pleasure. It's been really good fun getting involved in the show and getting to do something creative.
Yeah, we're kind of a big family here, aren't we?
You are. And it's such an amazing team, and everybody is so supportive of each other. It's lovely to be part of. And the added benefit of getting to meet amazing people and hearing their stories, which is just a gift, isn't it?
It surely is. And Kim, I've mentioned this to you before, but at the end of the week, which is today, we stream from Monday through Friday. I just sit back and I write down as much as I can remember about what I learned, because we have people from all over the world sharing incredible stories, information, entertainment, education. And I'm just so grateful and blessed. So we've got a great guest backstage. Before I bring him out, I'm going to spotlight you, and you have some incredible achievements yourself. And for people who are just joining us for the first time for the show, this is our second episode of this show. Tell our audience more about Kim.
Okay, so thank you. So I'm Kim-ADELE Randall. I'm a proud single mum and author, and I run a legacy media hub business. So helping other people who've got stories to get their story out there and to create live streams and podcasts. So if you've got something you're wanting to share, please do get in touch.
Thanks so much, Kim. All right. Our guest today is Dave Combs, and it's exciting because you and I are meeting him for the first time. We met him backstage, but we're just appreciative that he was watching the program and decided to come on and share his story. So, Kim, tell us a little bit more about him.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dave Combs is a songwriter, photographer, entrepreneur, successful business executive, and author. He authored the best-selling book, Touched by Music, and also created the popular song, Rachel's Song. And what I love about the story, and I can't wait for Dave to tell us more about it, is when he created Rachel's Song, it didn't have a name for quite a while until he became godparent to Rachel. And it became her song at her christening, which is just the most lovely gift that I could imagine being able to give to your godchild. So I'm looking forward to hearing all about that journey and learning more about the 120 songs and 15 albums that go alongside Rachel's Song and Touched by the Music.
David's certainly been busy, hasn't he? Let's bring him out. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I am so honored to be with you two lovely ladies. And Kim, I love your accent. You know, my ancestry came from London, England. There's a John Combs in fact, there's a Richard Combs that's buried right behind Shakespeare. If you look at Shakespeare,
If
you look at Shakespeare's tomb, the big grave right behind him with the statue, that's one of my his name was Richard Combs. It was one of Shakespeare's friends. But I love the way you say my name, because I know if I were living back then, that's how my name would have been pronounced. So thank you again for that little connection. Anyway, it's a delight to be with you ladies today.
Dave, where are you joining us from today?
I am in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, right in the middle, what they call it, the Piedmont of North Carolina.
I love North Carolina. I like your accent also.
Well, I was born and raised in East Tennessee, a little town called Irwin. And so I still have a lot of my Tennessee, they call it a Tennessee twang, but it's a Tennessee Southern accent. And still I lapse into that quite often. So I'm a Tennessean and proud of it, but I live in North Carolina and have since I graduated from college in 1969. So I've been here a long time.
Well, it looks good on you. So keep doing whatever you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
And by the way, I just love Touched by the Music. It's I play the piano and I sing in silence. No, but I feel like music is such a great way for us to share our emotions and get our feelings out and just express ourselves creatively. What are your thoughts about that?
That's exactly how I feel about it too. I was born in a musical family. My mother and father both played the piano. My grandmother Combs played the old alto harp and the old pump organ. That was even before electricity. And so I grew up around music, and music has always been a big part of my life. I grew up in church. Music was a big part of our church life. I love choir music, organ, piano. At my wife Linda's wedding, we had piano and organ duets for the music for our wedding. So music's always been a part of me. And it was, even when I was working at Western Electric AT&T in a technical oriented kind of career, at home and on weekends, still music was still a big part of my life. And it was in 1981 when I wrote the song that later became Rachel's song. That's the point in which music really was a turning point in my life, in my career. And we can talk more about that.
I love it. I'd love to hear more about that part, because of having looked into your website, and that's part of the story that I just loved. The fact that, it was a song that you'd written, your wife was humming it and asked what it was called. You didn't know what it was called. And then in 1983, when you became godparents to Rachel, it became her song. So I'd love to hear about that journey and then how that moved you into what you're doing today.
Well, as you know from reading the background, that song really was the beginning point of a new fork in my journey. When you get to certain points in your life, I call them threshold moments. You come to a point and you say, well, do I stay where I am? Do I go through the door and see what's on the other side? Or do I take the left fork or the right fork? So you have some decisions to make. Well, this song, Rachel's song, which was named in '83, ended up getting recorded in Nashville, Tennessee by a young musician by the name of Gary Prim. I hired him to make a demo recording of Rachel's song. I was working with AT&T in Nashville at the time and found him in a studio to get it recorded. And I didn't know what to expect when you hire somebody to do a demo recording of something. But I'm telling you, what I got was 100 times more than I expected. I live in the kind of the furniture hub of America here, or at least it used to be in North Carolina. We used to make a ton of furniture. And the furniture shows would always have demonstration copies of the new lines of furniture they would make. Well, a demo of a piece of furniture has to be a showcase. It's got to be the best. And the same thing applies to music. These musicians in Nashville, Tennessee that make demo recordings of new songs, those demos are top drawer. I mean, they are fantastic quality. Sometimes better than the eventual recording that the big name artist makes. But in any case, the recording of Rachel's song woke me up in terms of, I remember saying to myself after I heard it, after it was recorded, I kept saying, this is it. This is it. Now, I promise you, I did not know what it was, but I knew something down deep in me that this song was going to lead to something fantastic in my life. And it did. Everybody I played it for was taken by the music. It got played on the radio. A friend of mine had a radio show. He played it, and the radio station phones just lit up. People were calling in, play that again. What is the name of that song? And tell me more about this Combs guy that lives in Winston-Salem. And so I knew then that not only did it excite me, it excited everyone else that listened to it. So I got busy, and I was able to get it played on every easy listening station in the United States, about maybe 400 radio stations. And I started getting mail from people. They would write me letters and tell me how much my music had touched their lives. And so that was really what launched me on a path of thinking that, wow, this may lead to something that I've always wanted to do, and that is to work for myself and be self-employed and an entrepreneur. And it eventually did. And that's another part of the story.
Dave, that is amazing. Congratulations.
Thank
You
you.
made it sound so simple. Oh, I got it on 400 stations. How does that even happen, Dave?
Well, that is the very short version. And the long version takes about maybe 4 years to tell. But back then we didn't have the internet. There was no such thing as really email or Google or any of these wonderful technologies. We couldn't do what we're doing today, for example. And so I had to do my research of where are all the easy listening stations in the United States. Well, there was back then, and I think may still exist, a publication called Radio and Records, R&R. And they would also, for a fee, sell you a list of all the radio stations in the entire country by format. And it gave you the program director, their address, their phone number, all that. Well, I knew that I needed to contact these people. And so I started just down the list, making phone calls and I was still working. So I did this in evenings and weekends. Call these people and tell them what I had and about Rachel's song. I only had one song, Rachel's song. And so I called them and said, can I send you a recording of it? I did. And almost all of them loved Rachel's song. And so they began putting it in their rotation for playing on the radio. Well, it's pretty hard to make a dent in 400. 400 phone calls is a lot. But what I did notice is that several of them that I would call would say, well, we don't do our own programming. There's a company that helps us with our programming. It's a programming service. And I think the name of the company was Bonneville Broadcasting out of, I think it was Chicago. And so I said, okay, tell me who to talk to at Bonneville. So I called this fellow up and he was in charge of all the music for easy listening radio stations that they programmed. He loved Rachel's song. And so he, boom, put it out to about 200 radio stations at one time. And so instantly I go from my handful of radio stations to over 200. And it just exploded then from that. So sometimes you stumble on a break that leads you down a much more fruitful path.
Dave, I have so much respect and appreciation. That's old school cold calling when we had to pick up the phone and dial and dial. And I worked for AT&T for 10 years myself, by the way.
You did? Okay.
Yeah, back in the day. Question I have for you, because I think it's really important talking about touched by the music and impacting so many people. Your tools as a musician are really important as well. And the piano is the Steinway is an incredibly beautiful instrument. But what are your thoughts about different types of pianos to play the music on? Does it make a difference?
Well, to me it does, because my dream piano, I didn't have that piano when I wrote Rachel's song. I had I wrote it on a 100-year-old Knabe, K-N-A-B-E, was piano made in Baltimore, Maryland in 1875. I looked up the serial number. And this old piano was a baby grand. It sounded great, but it just wouldn't hold its tune. So I had to buy a tuning hammer and I would tune it up as best I could periodically so it would sound good. And that's really how I wrote Rachel's song. I always loved, after I finished tuning up my piano where it sounded good, I would love to sit down and play something pretty. Sometimes I'd play a sheet music, Moon River or some pretty song. But often I would just sit down and I call it doodling on the piano, just make up stuff, just play something pretty. This one particular time, it was in January, one evening in 1981, I sat down after tuning it and I sat at the keyboard and I started in the key of C. And I started playing this song. And it was kind of surreal. It was as if I knew this song, but I'd never heard it before. And I played it all the way through, the verse and the chorus, and I played it again. And it just sounded wonderful. I loved the song, but I didn't think about it. I never thought about it as writing a song. I just played it. And there's the point when, as you said, Kim, my wife came home a couple of days later and was humming this tune. And then's when I told her it didn't have a name and that I had just made it up. So the piano does have an important role in how I call it a conversation. I sit down at the piano and I have a conversation with it. You know, I play and I hear what it gives back to me, and it's just a wonderful relationship. But my dream piano had always been the piano you see behind me over here on this side, the Steinway. And so I promised Linda, when we made enough money from our music business to buy a piano, that would be our first major purchase. And it was. Now, it was several years before I made enough money to buy a Steinway grand piano, but I do. And I love that. It's still my favorite instrument today. But on the other side over here, you see a synthesizer. It's a Kurzweil keyboard. Well, for people that don't have the room or can't afford or don't want a grand piano, you can buy a keyboard. And today's keyboards, electronic keyboards, they sound great. And so there's nothing wrong with in your house or your apartment or wherever you live to have a keyboard, 88 key keyboard, and you can play and make great music on that too. And sometimes I love to play it because it has all the other sounds, you know, the strings and the horns and the orchestra and marimba and xylophone, all these sounds that you can entertain yourself with. So yes, the instrument is important, but the most important thing is to sit down at it. And as my wife used to say, your technique for writing a song is, don't tell anybody I'm using this language, but she said it was butt on the bench, the Bob technique. Get your butt on the bench and write something. Okay, Linda, I'm going to do that.
Oh,
you're such a great storyteller too. And by the way, I just want to let you know, my go-to is Moon River. I go out and play that maybe every day. I play that, but I want to get this sheet music for Rachel's song and play that.
Yes, and the technology today is unbelievable. You know, I transcribed the music for all 11 of my albums. I have 7 albums of original music and 4 albums of my favorite hymns. Well, Gary Prim's arrangements are so beautiful. When you hear, if you're a piano player like you are, when you hear them, you say, boy, I'd love to play that. So I sat down and I transcribed every recording of those 11 albums, note for note. Now, I promise you that took hundreds of hours, because back then I didn't have the digital technology today where you can do a MIDI recording and just have the computer transcribe it for you. I did it by ear. Yeah, if you had seen me on an airplane and traveling with AT&T back in the day, I would have my cassette player with my tape of Rachel's song and some sheet music manuscript, and I would sit there and I would play a measure of music, write down some notes, rewind it, play it again, over and over and over until I had that measure transcribed exactly as Gary played it. Go to the next measure. This took months to do that, but I ended up with the sheet music for Rachel's song. In fact, that was the first printed sheet music I ever did. And it's been used now in weddings and funerals and church services, and just for fun. It's been thousands and thousands of copies of Rachel's song. And today, the interesting thing is you don't have to go buy a printed hard copy at a bookstore or even order it on Amazon, which you can still do. But there's a company called Sheet Music Plus, where you can pay $4.99, push send, and pay it, and instantly have a PDF file of the sheet music and print it and play it right now.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea. I was going to go on Amazon after the show and buy the music.
Oh no, I forget I told you that. Go on and buy my book.
I love it, and what I love about your journey and your story is just that it comes from the heart. It's the passion for what you do, and the fact that even in the way that you created Rachel's song, it kind of came from connecting within, didn't it? It came from connecting with your soul and your purpose. Can you tell me more about how important you think that is?
I think that's very important. If you listen to any songwriter, and I love watching and listening to interviews of songwriters, whether it's Dolly Parton, who I love, or Alan Jackson, or any of these wonderful songwriters, they always describe that the music comes from the inside of them out. It's part of their soul. They're bearing their soul to people. They're sharing their life experiences. People, I like country music too. So country music songs always tell a story. Sometimes it's a sad sack story, but it's always a story. and other popular songs. They come from theme songs to a movie, you know, like Misty and More, and the theme from The Love Story, the instrumental that Henry Mancini did. All those they come from emotions and feelings and the inside of the creator of the music.
Yes, and country music, I love how you pointed that out, that there's always some story and you almost feel like you're transported there with that person on that journey. And
Mm-hmm.
again, you know, we have a number of programs that are about helping people with mental health, wealth, and wellness. And music is such a great tool to be able to express yourself.
Yes, there was a wonderful story that I tell in my book about a phone call that I got one day from one of my fans. Her name is Roberta Messner. Turns out she is a writer for Guidepost magazine. You can Google her and see YouTube videos. She has a marvelous story of her own. She is a dear, dear person, a dear friend of mine now. But I didn't know her then. When I answered the phone, she was calling to tell me how much my music, Rachel's song in particular, had touched her life. She has had a terrific disease. I think they call it elephantitis. It's horrible disease where your skin turns on itself and your skin is, you just have to have surgery after surgery to remove all these growths on your face. And it's grotesque and painful. And so she was calling to tell me how much Rachel's song had helped her through her pain following these surgeries. And she said she just was in tears telling me what my music had meant to her. And then she told me, of course, that she was a writer for Guidepost and that she loved, and I started, she was very inquisitive. All writers are inquisitive, as you know, like podcast hosts, they are very inquisitive. And so she was quizzing me about Rachel's song and how much that had, how that came about. Excuse me, I thought I had declined my phone here to interrupt me. I didn't want that. Sorry about that. Maybe you can edit that out. But anyway, she was inquiring about my story of how I wrote Rachel's song, the stories I'm telling you now. And so the more I told her, she said, wow, she said, you know, I write for Guidepost magazine, and I think they would love to publish this story in the magazine. Would you let me at least pitch the story to Guidepost? I said, sure, Roberta, go ahead. And so she did. And a couple of days later, she called me back and she said, well, I talked to the editor and he said, this is a great story. Let's go. Let's do this. And so we lined up some interviews and she got her information she needed to help ghostwrite the story for me. It's where it was going to be under my byline, but she was going to write it for me. And so she did, and it was a great story. And this was in 1994. And in September 1994, this little magazine hit the street. It was September issue. And in the magazine is my article called Two-Part Harmony. Got a picture of me sitting at the piano, and it tells the story of my writing of Rachel's song and how it eventually grew into a business that allowed me to quit my job at AT&T and do nothing but my music full time. As one of my fans wrote me and said, this is what God put you on this planet to do, so get on with it. So this little magazine went out to only about 3 million people. And I can tell you, in the back of the magazine, they fortunately, some would say unfortunately, but fortunately, they put my address and phone number in there and said, if you want to know more about this Combs and Rachel's song, here's his address, and the tapes are $10, the CDs are $14, and so on. Well, and my 800 number. Well, we could tell you to the second when that magazine hit the street, because my 800 number started ringing. And when you pick it up, I just read your article in Guidepost. I want to get a copy, blah, blah, blah. They were excited to get that music. And you'd hang it up and it'd ring again. Another one and another one. In fact, you didn't even have to wait for it to ring. You could just pick it up and there's somebody on the line. And I was blown away. And so that little magazine went to a lot of people. Well, 2 or 3 days later, my mailman comes to the house and he rings the front door, and I go to the door and he's standing there holding the top of this canvas bag. And it's too heavy for him to pick up. And it's one of those big gray canvas bags that the post office uses. And I said, can I help you? I forget what his first name was, but anyhow, he said, Dave, what have you done? Said, this is the most mail I've ever had for any of people on my route ever. And he said, I said, well, I just wrote a little article in Guideposts, and I guess these people are writing to me wanting to know about the music. He said, my word. And so every day for about a week, here he comes dragging this bag down the driveway to my front door. I heard from over 10,000 people in less than 2 weeks from that little article. And I promise you, that was really, I had already been getting fan mail. Don't get me wrong. There have been people writing me, but it wasn't that volume. And first of all, it taught me the value of publicity versus advertising. A good publicity article or appearance can do more for you than $1 million worth of advertising. And so I learned that lesson, but I also learned what my music meant to people. Even the story of the music, which it's in my book, Touched by the Music, the story about it, and lots more. But this story, the inspiring story, people are hungry for inspirational stories. I think even today, with all that's going on in the world, the craziness that's going on, people want an inspiring story. They want to be uplifted. They don't want to hear all this bad news of bombings and also on the news every day. Give me something inspiring and uplifting. And so that's what my music did. And that's when I realized that, I have just got to keep on. And that's my mission, is to spread the happiness and peace and a calm and to lower the stress level all over the world with as many people as I can. That's my mission with my music and my book.
Dave, I'm so touched by your story, and a question that just comes to mind. And by the way, thank you for all the gems you just dropped for the entrepreneur community out there about publicity and advertising and more. How was it to go from working for AT&T and sitting at that piano and dialing on the phone to bags and bags of mail coming your way and becoming a celebrity? How did you manage that?
Well, I'm sure you've read lots of books about visualization and imagining, what the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve. I forget if that was one of those famous quotes from way back from some of those wonderful inspirational authors. And it's true. If you visualize something long enough, and Linda and I had both visualized being able to touch millions of people through my music, and we had visualized having our mailbox full of letters from people saying how much my music had touched them. And little did I know when that would happen. But this was back a long time ago, before all this, right after the writing of Rachel's song. So it's handling how this happens. A lot of it has to do with how you have visualized it before it did happen. And if you think about, I want my own business, I want to be successful, I want to be a good public speaker, I want to present myself well, and you think about these things and you prepare by reading and talking to people, getting connected with the right people and associating with people that you like to be like, those things are important. And so that when you do arrive, things happen that make it happen. It's not a strange territory to you. You've thought about it in your mind before. It's not something that just boom, it happened to instantly. You've been there in your mind, but now you're there in reality. So I think that's kind of how we looked at it. I was so blessed to be able to transition from my work at AT&T. I loved my job. It was a great job. And my boss, he loved my music. We talked about this oftentimes. I didn't hide this from anybody, that I was working to work myself out of a job at AT&T. But the precious thing about this whole thing was about the time I was able to resign my job, AT&T, and you may remember this, having worked for AT&T, we went through about a 4 or 5 year cycle. We went from boom to bust. We would be either hiring everybody we could find or laying off thousands of people. And, at one point I was a shop manager. I had 1,000 people working for me in a factory. And it always broke my heart when we'd come through and they said, oh, you got to have a 15% cutback in your workforce. And you go through and you say, I'm sorry, so-and-so, tomorrow, next week's your last week. And so many times it was right before Christmas, and the timing was terrible. And we were going through one of those downturns at AT&T. And I remember meeting with my boss then for lunch in Greensboro at a restaurant. And I basically handed him my letter of resignation, and he was not surprised because he knew that things were really taking off with my music. And I guess he's just wondering, how long is this guy going to stay around here? He's making more money at home. But anyhow, it turns out that my boss looked at me and he said, Dave, your resignation here has just saved 2 young people's jobs. I was going to have to let so-and-so go and so-and-so go. And because now I don't have your salary I was a higher paid employee. I don't have your salary that I have to budget for. I can take that money and I don't have to tell these 2 young guys that you're no longer employed. So that did my heart good to know that not only did it help, I was on the right track for me, but God had a plan that saved the career of 2 other young people's jobs as well.
Wow, what an amazing story. Because it is awful, isn't it? Having had to do it myself, there's nothing more heartbreaking than having to run a redundancy program and go and stand there and tell people that that their job comes to an end. So I think knowing that you were able to save 2 people, must have gone such a long way to add even more value to what your transition from your job to your music business has brought you.
It was very confirming. You're right. It was very confirming that I knew I had made the right decision, and the timing was perfect as well.
So if you had to give advice to anybody who's currently got a dream, but they're doing their day-to-day job and they're not quite sure how they're going to create that dream, what advice would you give them?
Well, first of all, is don't give up on the dream, as we talked about a minute ago, with the visualization and thinking and dreaming and planning and talking with your friends, your spouse, whoever, about your dreams, and keep that in your mind and forward. And don't give up on your job. It's probably not a wise move to just jump cold turkey out of a job into something you're unsure about. But on the other hand, if you have the time and the skills and the ability and the creativity, go ahead and create whatever it is that you are good at, whether it's a product, whether it's a service, or whether it's a creative product like music or sculpture or painting or any of these creative arts. Do the best, create whatever it is that you're good at. And if you find, and hopefully you will, that whatever you're creating or dreaming about has some demand from people that want to either buy it or pay you for it, there's some commercial value to what you are dreaming and doing, then start small. My philosophy is, if I can find something that works on a small scale, like if I can sell my music in one little gift shop in Old Town Alexandria, my first, and that little gift shop sold thousands of copies of my album just from playing it and selling it in her shop. That was my little business model. Yeah, I did a spreadsheet way back. This is 1988. And I did a spreadsheet of, here's how much I sold the tapes and CDs to her. Here's how much they cost me. The difference is my gross profit. And I knew how many in a certain period of time that she had sold in her shop. And the number was a good profit number. It was just one shop, and it wasn't going to be enough to make a living on. But I said, okay, that model works. I know it works on a scale of 1. What if I only had one gift shop in all 50 states? Surely to goodness, there's another shop like that one in all 50 states. So let's make another column in our spreadsheet for the model and say the column 1 times 50. Well, you look at the bottom line gross profit number. Well, that's an interesting number, getting to really interesting. Well, what if we just had 5 gift shops in every state? 250, column 3. Look at the bottom line number, and I said, hey, Linda, come here, look at this number. That number was about twice what I was making at AT&T. Then is when I realized, my MBA started kicking in and my analytical mind working. I said, this is the model I need to chase after, and I need to grow my business from this 1 to the 250. Now, how I'm going to do that, I'm not real sure yet, but I know it can be done, and that's what I'm going to do. Now, it took years to get to that point, to the point where I could go into my boss and say, all right, I've reached enough income now to where I don't need to work at AT&T anymore. And that's how I decided to grow But you need to do the same thing for any entrepreneurial venture. Make sure you have a product that's good. You know your customers, you know the demographics and geographics of your customers, where they are, and you figure out different ways to get to them. This day and time, it's a lot more ways through the internet and advertising and Facebook ads and Amazon. There's all kinds of ways to reach customers, and then try out some of those on your product or whatever. Find one that works. And once you find something that works, duplicate the heck out of it. And then's when you have a path, I think, for success. Don't just skip a bunch of steps and try to jump in, quit your job and go do all this when you don't know exactly what you're doing. Find out what you're doing as you go along and learn, and then go for it. And that's kind of my advice to entrepreneurs, is use that same model that I use, to start small, make it work, and then duplicate the heck out of it.
Great advice, Dave. I have about 1,000 questions I'd like to ask you in all different areas, but you have to come back. So one question I'd like to ask you on a different tangent, for people who are in the performing arts. I know it's been very difficult for some people during the pandemic to make money, and also the whole way the music industry has transformed in terms of how we can download music, but yet the artist is not necessarily getting the bulk share of the money. So you've seen a lot in your journey, and what are your thoughts now about the future for performing artists getting paid and being paid their value?
That is a really interesting and very tough question, because you're right. It has become so crowded and competitive that it is hard to break through the noise. It's very similar to what I'm sure you experience with podcasts. I heard yesterday, I think there's over 2 million podcasts and growing. Probably by next week, there may be 3 million. I don't know. But for any business venture, whether it's music or podcasts or anything, it's so crowded in the digital world these days, because there's the cost of entry into the business is almost zero. Anybody with a laptop that has a camera on it can do a podcast. Anybody with a laptop and GarageBand has a $1 million studio right in your laptop that used to be in a expensive building where I paid thousands and thousands of dollars to get something recorded. You can do that on your laptop now at home. So the price of entry, the cost of entry, is very, very low. And so for musicians, whether you're a composer, it's even tougher for composers, let's put it that way, because first of all, if you're not a performer, like I'm really not a professional performer. I do perform Rachel's song and so forth, but I'm not a performer by profession. I am a songwriter, a composer. I write the music and I hand it over to the professional, Gary Prim, and we go in the studio with my engineer, Ronnie Light, and we make great music. But that's him arranging and performing it. And then I sell my music now digitally over the internet. But for those that are just composers, that's tough to make a living of it, because you have to write a hit song basically and have some famous big name artist take your song and go with it, and then you get some royalties. And the royalties is a real thorn in the side for the musicians these days, because we're not being paid. First of all, I bet if I ask your listeners, do you know how much money the composer of a song gets each time it's streamed on any streaming media? Would that just guess? And the answer is, it is, for me, 0.2 pennies. If in dollars, it's 0.002. You have to do 10 times streaming to get 2 pennies. Now, that's a lot of streaming to have any kind of money. Can you imagine trying to make $50 or $75 or $100,000 to live on as a songwriter? How many streams you'd have to have? Oh man, it's in the millions. And getting there is, in the competitive world with all this other music, is very, very hard to do. And for those that are blessed to be good performers, at least they have, thank goodness now it's opened back up to where we do have some live performances. But back during the pandemic, when the live performances went away, you saw all those news stories about the performers that, they hadn't been in front of a live audience in over a year. It was heartbreaking to see their livelihood just completely gone, practically gone. And so if you're a performer and blessed with able to have performances that are paid performances and sell some of your product in the back of the room, so to speak, then you're able to probably make a pretty good living. And if you're a very, very popular artist, like some of the big names, yeah, you can make a really good living. But that's the rarity. There's millions of musicians and performers that are, they just go from club to club. They'll get their $300 or $400 or $500 per night for gig or whatever to play and sing. But that's not the millions of dollars that the big artists are making. So it's a tough world. It's competitive. But for the creators and performers out there, I'd say do not give up. Our craft and our art and the music we create is so important, not just for us, but for the generations to come, that we need to keep at it. And someday we'll figure out all of the ways to optimize the income side of it. But for now, it's tough, but don't give up.
Thanks, Dave. I love hearing a little bit about the backstory, about the business behind the music industry, because you have to be an entrepreneur as well. Otherwise, people are taking money out of your pocket left and right, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Well, our show has come to an end, unfortunately, but I seriously would love for you to come back on this or any of our other shows, because there's so much more to talk about with you, Dave.
Thank you. I would love to do that. Maybe we need to have part 2 sometime.
Definitely. And also come on the business show. I think that would be terrific. Dave, I'm going to spotlight you. And for people who are watching, they can see the banner, but for people listening on the radio, they can't see it. What's the best way to contact you, and who would you like to reach out to? You have more email that has to be answered.
First of all, I do love getting emails from people, because that's the usual method of getting my feedback now. Is I love to hear how my music has touched people's lives. And my email is just very simple. It's dave@combsmusic.com. And my website, you can go to my website, and when you land on it, on the left side of the page, you'll see my book. And on the right side of the page, you'll see my CD on there, so that you can click on the links and hear some samples of the music. If you go to Amazon, you can actually go to some sample pages in my book. And I have an audio book that I did. I read my whole book on an audio book format. It's called Audible. And so it's about an 8-hour read. If you want to hear my Tennessee Southern accent for 8 hours, you can buy the Audible book. But anyhow, go to Amazon. My link on my website will take you to Amazon to get the book. But you can actually buy my book for people not in the United States. You can buy my book at anywhere books are sold. They can get the book there. Whether it's in England or anywhere in the world, it's available. But go to my website, combsmusic.com, and do send me an email about how about you go listen to Rachel's song, and then write me and tell me how it touches your heart. I would love to hear from you.
Thank you, Dave. I'm excited to buy the book, and also to get the sheet music and play it on the piano, and I'll record it and send it to you. You have to cover your ears, but
I bet it'd be great.
Thank you again. I'll reach out to you later today and get you scheduled on our show again, and some of our other shows as well.
That sounds perfect. And thank you. And thanks to both of you for having me today. This has been a real joy.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure, and looking forward to next time.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Bye, Dave.
Bye-bye.
Oh my gosh, I just love him, don't you?
What an amazing guest, and what a great story. And what I resonated was against last week's conversation when we were talking about storytelling and the importance of storytelling. And it really is how we, in my opinion, it's the thing that connects us around the world, because we all teach and we all learn through stories. And he's just taught us so much and made it really enjoyable along the way. So what a tremendous Friday afternoon feeling. Morning for you guys, but noon for me.
I agree with you. And you know what else? Dave is so humble and down to earth that all of his celebrity and success has not changed him from, I guess, who he's always been. I just love that.
Absolutely. I mean, perfect for a show called Authentic Achievements, because he is authentically him, and his resilience and tenacity, he didn't even seem to notice that he had those, and yet they were woven through that story. There are 400 phone calls to get into those shows. They're taking it down to the having the spreadsheet and getting your model for one and then replicating it. Great examples for anybody out there that's got a dream to succeed that they can actually actionably follow.
It's so true. Just a quick story. I remember I was working for the Philadelphia Inquirer selling the Sunday paper, and I had to use the rotary phone in time. And I just wanted one person to order the Sunday Times. And somebody did. It was like just keep dialing and dialing and dialing. But back then, I call it old school, when cold calling was so different, and you really just had to keep persevering. And cold calling's never been fun, but that was a great story that he shared, and look how it's turned out for him. So if you're out there and you are cold calling, keep going. If that's your passion, whatever it is you're doing, make it happen. And Dave's point about the publicity versus advertising is so true. All of the social media, they're constantly asking for you to market and advertise. No, it's like let the word spread. Let it be authentic, that people follow and want to work with you. What are your thoughts, Kim?
I completely agree, because the thing that we have found out is that people want to work with people that they know, like, and trust. And actually, you can't work out if you know, like, and trust somebody from an advert, because it's not them. Whereas if you just let your passion speak, people get to know you, and then they can start to decide, do they like you? Do they trust you? And at that point, do they connect with you? And that's when your business will flourish. And it was peppered throughout his stories, which were amazing, just how small the world is. And when you're just putting it out there, what the world brings back for you. So it reminded me of one of my favorite quotes, which is from Pablo Picasso, which is, the meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose of life is to give it away. And I love that, because it's that whole part of saying, find the bit that lights your soul, the piece that makes joy of everything that you do, and then share that with the world, because that is going to be you at your authentic best. And he's just given us such an amazing living example of that brought to life.
Absolutely. Such an honor. And Kim, while I have you on Spotlight, if you could share your contact information, who would you like to reach out to you, and what's the best way for them to do so?
Okay, fabulous. Thank you. So if you've got an inspiring story and you'd like to join us here, we would love for you to join us here. Or if you're really passionate about setting up your own and getting your message out, then please do drop me an email. I'd love to hear your story. It's hello@KIM-ADELE.com, or you can find me on either of my websites, KIM-ADELE.com or legacymediahub.com. But we really just want to be able to share more inspiration, because, as Dave said, there's a lot of bad things going on in the world, and the only thing greater than fear is hope. And by sharing motivational, inspirational stories of people overcoming things, we're hoping that we can create enough hope to get rid of that fear and allow us to find our happy place.
Well said, Kim. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful seeing you today, and I really appreciate doing the show with you.
Me too. And I look forward to next week.
Absolutely. Have a great weekend.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye. Well, folks, that was a fantastic show. We've got another one coming right up, which is the power of etiquette and manners, starting in just over 10 minutes. And I'm just going to share a couple of plugs for myself. So in addition to running this platform, I am also a certified life and career coach. I'm the listening mentor, and I teach people how to listen at an authentic level. So if you'd like to be part of our community, I welcome you. Our community is the Elevated Listening Community. And you can see there, you just go over to my personal website, which is drjacqueline.com/join, and you'll find out all the wonderful things that you'll get by doing that. The next thing I want to mention is we are having our reunion show. As you may know, if you've been following us, we launched this platform officially on January 10th of this year. I retired from my corporate career in 2020, and then went down this path, and we went from Rapping with Dr. Jacqueline to USA Global TV. We have 20 live broadcasts every week. And if you would like to join us on the reunion show, it is May the 1st. All of our guests are welcome. And this is not an interview. This is where you sell your service, your product, your event. You let our audience know what it is you have to offer and how they can go ahead and work with you. You can do so by going over to Eventbrite. And here is the link for you to do that, if I can find it. All right, there it is. Just go to Eventbrite, put in USA Global TV reunion events, and we'd love to have you. We'll be live streaming for 6 hours, and joining me will be Mr. Al Cini, and he and I do the business show together. He's definitely somebody you want to get to know, ALCINI, and you can find him over on LinkedIn. Okay, as we close out the show, I'm going to be playing one clip, and then we're going to immediately go to the power of etiquette and manners. You stay where you are. I'm going to run to the other studio, but let's take a look and take care of yourself. Thank you again, Dave, for being here, and thank you, KIM-ADELE.
Меня зовут Маша, мне 9 лет, я живу в Красногоровке, у меня все хорошо. Кушать у нас есть, пить у нас есть, сахар у нас есть, все есть. Только дров не хватает. На буржуйке, когда у нас есть, вот эти мы дрова пособираем, закинем, оно горит. Например, в 10 запалили, в 11 закончили, вода нагрелась, и все, и мы купаемся.
В наш дом 4 было прямых попаданий, так что мы боимся. Человека даже осколками поранило, забрали в больницу с 6-го подъезда соседа, так что мы тоже боимся. У нас много деток, деваться нам некуда, нас никто нигде не ждет.
Когда вырасти, я хочу найти работу такую, чтобы я помогала людям, которые бедные, там